Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Brian Corbin, and today I'm going to talk to you about how to write the rhetorical analysis essay. Over the next few slides, you will see exactly what you have to do for success on this important project. First, we have to ask ourselves exactly what is rhetoric, and we'll talk about that in the coming slides. But there you see on your screen a picture of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This man was a terrific orator who inspired people around the world to make their lives better. So the first thing we have to do is ask ourselves, what is rhetorical analysis? At first, it may seem kind of intimidating and maybe difficult to understand when you hear the word or the phrase, but actually it's quite simple when you break it down and define it. Rhetoric means analysis, and rhetorical analysis means the breaking down of something into its parts and interpreting how those parts fit together. Thus, in rhetorical analysis, we examine how authors attempt to persuade their audience by looking at the various components that consist or make up the art of persuasion. And we'll talk about those components here in the next few slides. Okay, so one of the first things we need to remember in life is that most things are an argument. Every text, everything spoken, everything written or visual is usually in some form or another an argument. Human beings both produce and receive such text or such ideas or such media. Thus, we understand what the text or the media means. This is usually done implicitly without us actually thinking about why we understand the information. But rhetorical analysis asks us to understand why we know the information, to create meaning out of what we're reading or seeing, and to understand why the authors or the presenters of the media constructed knowledge and how they did so. Also, rhetorical analysis asks us to consider what kind of action the creator of the content may be asking us to complete. Rhetorical analysis also helps us understand explicitly rather than implicitly how language of a text works and how we can use such language to work for us. Most people just do not write because they have nothing better to do with their lives. There's usually a reason for someone to want to write something, and that's what is known as the exigence that you see at the top of your screen right there. Once a writer has a reason to write, he figures out who his or her audience will be. And from there, he or she figures out the purpose of the piece of text that is going to be composed. Once the purpose is known, it is then easier to figure out the logos, ethos, or pathos that will be used. So a writer can choose to use logos, logic, in conveying his or her points. Ethos, which is credibility. So maybe an author cites a credible expert on a topic, or maybe he cites a celebrity to gain notoriety for his piece. Or maybe the author uses pathos, which is emotion, to draw the reader into his or her writing. Ethos, logos, and pathos are primarily what people use to convey their ideas. From there, you can then consider the diction, the syntax, the imagery, and the figurative language. So with the syntax, you look at how were the ideas presented. The imagery, was there powerful images used? What kind of language was used to present the information? When you write your paper, you want to consider how did the author use these ideas presented on your screen right there. Exigence, like I said earlier, that's the problem, incident, or situation that causes the writer to write the piece. Why did the writer write this piece? Most likely the piece would not have been written if there had not been an exigence, some kind of situation that caused the writer to want to write that piece. The audience also helps to shape the rhetoric because the audience has either an immediate response to what was written or an intermediate response to what was written where they think about the text later and then maybe they take action upon what they read. The question you've got to figure out is what type of response do the author want from the audience? Do the author want an immediate response or an intermediate response? You should think about this as you write your paper. Let's look at the appeals. Logos is an appeal to logic, like I said earlier. It's an attempt to persuade the reader representing logical arguments. It includes if-then statements, inferences and conclusions, and even deductive reasoning. It's the highest form of persuasion. The central appeal of anything is that it must be logical, because without logic, nothing that follows it would be reasonable. You have to consider whether or not there is logos used in the piece of writing you are analyzing. You may analyze a piece with no logos, and that's fine, but you need to state that. Ethos. This refers to the ethical appeal. This is an attempt to persuade based on moral grounds. For example, right versus wrong, good versus evil. You need to consider these things when you write your paper. Were these items included? You should also consider the credibility of the individual cited in the paper. So if a writer's writing about basketball, but he cites a doctor in psychology as being an expert, that's a problem, right? What about the credibility of the author? Does the author have the credentials to write about the topic? What about the credibility of the publication? You've got to consider all these things because ethos refers to credibility. And if your paper's lacking this that you're analyzing, you can point these out as being a hole in the analysis. Pathos. This is an appeal to emotion. This is an attempt to persuade the reader by causing them to respond to the way an issue or topic makes them feel rather than think about it logically. This can invoke bias or prejudice. This can use non-logical appeals, and it includes informal language. A classic example of pathos might be a homeless person standing on the corner with a dog. Okay, most people don't feel bad for the homeless person, they feel bad for the dog. That is pathos right there. Tone. You have to understand logos, ethos, and pathos to understand tone. These all contribute to the way the paper is written. Tone refers to the words that are used when writing an article, an essay, a piece of text. Tone is the attitude toward a subject, character, or audience. Like I said earlier, it's conveyed through the choice of words, which is diction, the word order, which is syntax, how the person orders the arguments and how the person orders the words in the sentence, and even figurative language, which can include details, imagery, quotes, things like that. That is tone. In order to figure out the organization, structure, and form, you have to work chronologically when analyzing a piece of literature or a piece of writing. You have to go paragraph by paragraph and look at the items I've showed you, the diction, the ethos, the logos, the pathos, all those things. You have to go paragraph by paragraph in chronological order. If you do not do this, you cannot identify shifts and tones and other elements if you do not look at it chronologically. So follow this in chronological order. Surface features. Diction. What is diction? Diction is word choice that's intended to convey a certain effect. People use word choice to convey ideas and impressions, to evoke emotions, and to convince their readers of the truth. Think of speeches by Martin Luther King Jr., John F. Kennedy Jr., Barack Obama. These are all people that used word choice in powerful ways to convey ideas. Syntax. This is simply the arrangement and order of words in a sentence. So look at the way the author fashioned his or her sentences and write about that. To further explain, you want to look at the sentence structure. Did the author use short sentences or long sentences? Longer sentences sometimes show that the author's being more thoughtful, but longer sentences also can convolute the writing as well. Shorter sentences are often passionate or flippant. Look at the way the writer composed his or her sentences. Look at the way he presented ideas in a sentence or she presented ideas in a sentence. Were examples at the beginning of a paragraph or at the beginning of a sentence? And look at the arrangement of ideas in a paragraph like I just said. Is there any evidence or pattern to the structure? Why did the author choose to write the sentences in the way that he or she did? This is what you need to be considering when you do your analysis of your text. Surface features, imagery, figurative language, things like that. These include asking yourself, did the author use similes, metaphors, allusions, alliterations? Did the author paint a picture with his or her words, with his or her writing? You want to ask yourself these questions and talk about it in your essay. Okay, here's a sample paragraph to help you. Smith uses effective appeals to emotion throughout the article. Specifically, words like heartless and unfeeling are used to describe Walmart. Furthermore, Smith focuses on that sense of Walmart as being a giant and having a virtual monopoly to emphasize the idea that Walmart is overpowering the little guy who runs a mom and pop shop. Because the primary audience of Small Business Journal is composed of small business owners and entrepreneurs, these emotional appeals will be effective. It is likely that those readers either fear being crushed by giant corporations or have already felt the effects of businesses like Walmart. So you're going to look for these kind of words, maybe not these exact ones, but this gives you an idea what you have to do for your paper. You'll have many different paragraphs that look similar to this. Before concluding, I want to give you a few pointers to help you do well in this essay. These pointers are a result of many students not following the advice that I've given, so I hope this helps you not fall into these pitfalls I'm going to show you. First of all, you've got to use outside sources to verify the rhetoric. For example, you can verify the facts that were presented in the article with another source. Maybe someone talked about global warming, and you can verify whether or not those statements were true in the article you're looking at. You want to use outside sources to discuss what others have said in the topic. Maybe other people have said something similar that helps prove what was written in the paper you're looking at. Do not write in first person. Do not do this. You have to write in third person. No, I think, no, I believe, stuff like that. You want to give context. You want to discuss briefly the publication and the author's credentials. This will require you to maybe look up the author on the internet to figure out if he or she has a degree or what his or her knowledge base is and why that knowledge base may contribute to their ability to write the paper you're looking at. You can also discuss how the author's background may have contributed to the writing. So you've got to do these things. And last but not least, this is not an argument essay. Do not argue points about the topic. Do not do this. Do not argue about gun control. If someone's writing about gun control, analyze how he or she wrote about gun control, but do not argue your case for or against it. Stick to analyzing the writing. Stick to analyzing the ethos, logos, and pathos. Look at the tone. Look at the diction. Look at the word choice. Look at all these things I showed you in this paper, but do not make this an argument essay. If you make it an argument essay, you will not get a passing grade on it. This is an analysis essay, a rhetorical analysis essay. Please try and do this to the best of your ability. You can always email me if you need help. Thank you for your time, and I hope you do well in this assignment.